Good morning. Okay, so in terms of accomplishments for 2022 for the Security Technical Work Group, and by the way, you can see the charter of the technical work group at the link that's basically provided here. We completed the version 2.1 SNIA TLS specification for storage systems. This document has actually got potential use beyond just storage, but its roots is essentially the harmonization of HTTPS, which uses TLS, for CDMI, SMIS, and Swordfish. So this document, we've teased out the detailed requirements for TLS in a way that allows us to, over time, adjust those requirements without forcing modification to the core specifications that I just mentioned. So this particular document is important because it allows us to adapt the security when such a change is needed. What you're seeing with this specification is work now to update the ISO equivalent of this, which you'll see is some of our ongoing activities. We also this year spent quite a bit of time with computational storage, looking at security considerations that have in fact been included in the architecture specification, as well as some ongoing further work in this space. So looking at basically threat modeling around computational storage and trying to identify things that would need to be addressed. And then another area is dealing with key standards. And in this particular case, we spent quite a bit of time this year dealing with the revision of the ISO 27040 standard, which is dealing with storage security. This is a critical document for the storage industry in that this new edition went from just being purely guidance to now including requirements and guidance. In other words, there's a baseline set of security controls that once this document is published, you can expect auditors are going to be using to come in and look at storage infrastructure. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at and suggesting text and rewrites of materials in here. So there's lots of new content in this, lots of activities. Another important standard that was published this year, this was actually in the August timeframe, is the IEEE 2883. So this standard deals with media standardization, at least at this point. This is the go-to standard in terms of how do you make data go away on certain types of storage technology. And we anticipate that, as you heard earlier, with the green storage activity, Lot 9, which actually has a standardization element, we anticipate that 2883 is likely to be the go-to standard to help deal with that. Next slide, please. In terms of future work items, we anticipate that, as I mentioned, they updated the 20648, which is the ISO version of the TLS specification. We have a couple of white papers that are being refreshed. One is dealing with fiber channel security that we'll be working with the FCIA, and another paper on encryption and key management. Now, previous versions of these documents, have been around for a while, but there's a fundamental change. They used to basically look at the first edition of 27040 and then sort of explain what 27040 said. The new edition of 27040 has all of the sort of tutorial material removed. And in fact, as of this morning, the new 27040 is actually pointing out these two white papers, as well as one from the Data Protection and Privacy Committee, are sources of useful information on these topics. We think that's going to be important because it allows us in SNIA to, over time, update things like the encryption and key management white paper to introduce new topics that weren't actually covered in the original standard. For example, work that's being done in NVMe and the Trusted Computing Group on Keeper.io, which is a new type of encryption. So we anticipate that this new arrangement is going to actually help the industry stay on top of things. We also expect there's going to be security presentations and webinars at, the SDC and Bright Talks. And we do quite a bit of work with the data security and legal terms in the SNIA dictionary. In terms of collaboration, we work probably most closely with the Data Protection and Privacy Committee, but because security is a cross-cutting aspect, we actually get involved with almost all the work in SNIA in some fashion. External groups, we're collaborating with Insights, in particular, the Technical Committee on Cybersecurity and Privacy, IEEE. There's the Cybersecurity Privacy Standards Committee, which has multiple working groups underneath it that we're engaged with. Obviously, the Trusted Computer Group, in particular, the Storage Work Group, the International Data Standardization Consortium, the Open Compute Project, FCIA, as I mentioned earlier, and even the American Bar Association. Next slide, please. Give you an idea of the nature of the membership in the security twig. This is the current membership, or the membership as of early December. We do have some individual members that are also actively contributing in as part of this activity. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's the expected impact? Well, we're definitely doing a lot of educational materials, best practices, formal standards. As I mentioned, the 27040 is likely to be published by the end of the first quarter of this year. IEEE has additional work underway. We definitely do a lot of security and threat analysis. This is often for the internal SNIA activities. In terms of the industry segment and relevance, definitely consumer and users of storage technology, as well as the vendors and developers and implementers. So it's pretty much across the board, and is often driven by events of the day. So we in many cases, the technologies that we're worrying about are driven by what we call black swan events or emerging problems. So we have to deal with a people problem, which is sort of core to the security issue. If you'd like to join the work, we've got folks that are actively developing materials. Others are just monitoring, because there's a dialogue that takes place that's pretty unique because of crosstalk between the various activities that I showed earlier. So the work basically monitoring, contributing, coordinating, and educating is what you get out of by participating. Our weekly calls are on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. And if you're an active participant, I would say that the workload is probably 1 to 2 hours a week, 1 hour being the meeting and maybe some additional work. And this is contact information for the chair of the Security Technical Work Group.